talking about the latest and greatest technology. I'm just here in my backyard. Simple video, simple life. We're gonna be talking about a camera that in many ways is a champion. So we're gonna be talking about the Leica M3, also known as the very first Leica with an M mount, also known as one of the best film Leica cameras ever made. Also known as one of the cameras that's still making history, because when you think about it, this camera was designed or released in 1954, I believe it was. And it is the first camera with the M mount, cin mount, that we continue to have today in digital modern Leica cameras, such as this Leica M10D that I have right here. So, and let me show you, why not? So here's the mount of the Leica M3, and here is the mount of the Leica M10D. Same mount, and as you can see, this Noctilux can fit in this camera with no problem. And as a matter of fact, this Noctilux is gonna fit in this camera really good, because this camera was streamlined for 50 millimeters. So when you get this camera, you are gonna see very bright in this viewfinder, the 50 millimeter frame lines. And I just advance the film. They're very bright, and what happens is if you put a lens that is going to be wider, such as a 35, for example, you're not going to see the entire image. So you're always going to see a window representing, a 50 millimeters. Now, the reason why I got this camera too is because of this lens right here. I always said that this lens will look really good on a Leica M3, will make a great pair. I got a while back ago, and this one is the Scimitar 50 millimeter f2 is a collapsible lens, and I like that, for portability. It's also a lens that was designed many years way back. I don't remember exactly, but probably 50s, 60s, something like that. And it is a lens that has gray rendering. I've been using it with my digital cameras, but I always thought that this lens will make a great pair with a film camera for black and white. And this is exactly what we're gonna be discussing today, because I got this camera mainly to shoot with this lens. So this lens is gonna remain permanently attached to this body. And the film that I have right now is Tri-X 400 speed. So let me tell you a little bit about the camera and the things that you can control, and why this camera is a great deal even today in 2024. Number one is that you can still get these cameras at a fairly good price. If you're into film, I pay for this one in great condition. Look at the condition of this camera. I pay about $1,500. Again, it's not cheap, because you can get a full out of focus camera if you're into that this day for a known brand. But this camera is from the 1950s and is in great condition. Another reason why I like this camera, it just doesn't take any battery, unlike my Leica M6 that does take a battery for the meter. And this camera does not have a meter. That's the main reason why it doesn't have batteries. Not only that, with this camera you cannot rate the film like you could do on the Leica M6, for example. So the way to expose in this camera is mainly by controlling your shutter speed and your aperture, and it ends right there. So you do have a dial right here, which is more of a reminder of the film that you have in, but it doesn't have any effect on the exposure by moving that dial. I don't even play with it, because I remember that I always have Tri-X 400 in this camera. So basically, I've been shooting with this camera, and I got it not too long ago. I've been shooting using the sunny 16 rule. So basically, in a very sunny day, you're gonna set up your aperture to f16 in your lens, and then you are gonna try to match your film speed to the shutter speed. So I'm shooting Tri-X 400. So the closest that I can go in this camera is gonna be 500, and the shutter speed, by the way, goes only up to 1 under 1,000 of a second. So yeah, so you're gonna have to rely on those two variables right there. And as the light diminishes, then you go down in your aperture, and pretty much that's the way how you expose. And then you can go in between by lowering your or making your aperture wider and increasing your shutter speed, and those are very familiar, get to a point that they can expose in any situation by simply looking at these two parameters. And that's kind of like where I want to get, because I think that even shooting film cameras, you know, my film go-to cameras, my Leica M6, and does have a meter, and I do rely on the meter. You know, I just feel that shooting with Leica M6 and shooting with a Leica, you know, M digital is pretty much the same thing. You know, there's no much difference in there. Of course, one is film, one is digital, but this one is going to give you first a couple of headaches. You know, the first time that you start shooting, it's gonna frustrate you a little bit, but it's going to, in my opinion, make you a better photographer for the sole reason that as you start shooting with a camera like this one, you start actually gauging the light and understanding the different parameters that would apply just by simply looking at the scene. You know, I'm looking right now, my backyard right here, I see a palm tree right there. Probably I would go f4, which is kind of like the Sunny 16 rule for you know, sunset. So I would go like around f4, and I would take a shot. And in fact, I'm gonna do that right now. So I'll keep you posted on another video when I develop the film. So yeah, you know, so you basically keep, oh, and I forgot to move the aperture in the lens, so I have to take another one. So I made a mistake, and I'm paying for an exposure that's gonna be not good. There you go. A lot of new things to pay attention to. So yeah, so again, the challenge, you know, and the fact that I don't have readouts telling me where I'm at, kind of like excites me, and that's one of the main reasons I always wanted to get this camera. But not only that, I don't know if I mentioned before, but I paid $1,500 for this camera. Yes, I said that. $1,500 for a camera that's in great condition. There are barely no scratches in the camera, and I believe the leatherette is brand new. And it is, you know, Leica first M camera. So I love Leica cameras, and I like to have them, collect them, and shoot with every single one of them. And this one was one that I needed to have in the collection. So again, very simple approach, you know, to exposing, and pretty much all the mistakes are only on me, and I love to own them. So right now you can get this camera in a couple of versions. This one is the single stroke, meaning that one full crank of the lever is going to advance the film fully. There's another one that is dual stroke. Now, Leica makes or made also the M2. And the M2, I thought that was even older, but then I realized that this is the first M camera with the M mount. So the M2 was actually released 3 or 4 years after this camera. And the difference between that camera is that the Leica M2 comes with the frame lines for 35 millimeters and other frame lines. I believe that this one is 50, 90, and 135. And the other one goes in between. So again, 35 millimeter is what I shoot daily, and that's why I don't shoot 50 daily. And I love the rendering of this lens. So this lens is gonna live there, and for everything else, if I'm shooting film, you know, I could always shoot with my Leica M3 for the 35 millimeter work. But mainly, like I mentioned before, it is to kind of like refresh myself, and I wanna get to a point where I see a scene and I'm like, okay, yeah, that is pretty much FA, you know, yeah, FA, shutter speed, 500. Now let's tweak it 250. To be honest with you, I'm not at that point. And why? Because of the gear, you know? The gear makes me more relaxed and lazy. And I mentioned, you know, in a couple other videos, you know, the more I can feel connected to the image, it doesn't matter if the image is not perfect, but the fact that, you know, I put a lot of my input in the camera and the dialing, you know, it's a great picture to me at the end of the day. And that's all that matters, you know? I don't shoot for people. Usually I just shoot for myself. So, Leica M3 from 1950, first Leica camera with an in-mount lens. Finally, I own it for $1,500. You could go and buy an X100 Mark VI if you like. All that technology, go for it. But this was my choice, and I'm really happy with it. Look at the way it looks with this Noctilux. I can't wait to shoot with this lens in this camera. Yeah, it just looks really good. Man, guys, this camera is from the 50s. Look at a camera from the 2000s. 2000, when was this released? 2017? Look at a camera from 2000s, look at a camera from the 50s. Like very little change, if any. Look at that. These cameras look very, very similar. I mean, for a camera to have actually maintained their shape throughout all these years, what other camera company have done that? I don't know. And Nikon is trying to come back from some of those older film cameras. I wish Canon actually released a Canon, what was that, the AE1 or EA1? That's another film camera that I have. I like that shape, kind of like the Nikon one. Yeah, it would be nice to have that camera in digital format. But anyway, so what I was saying is, because when I'm not scripting, I just go all over the place. That's actually my dilemma filming YouTube videos. I have ADD, OCD, all the Ds and all this stuff. So yeah, pretty much the same. And especially the Leica M10D, even it looks similar from the back. Amazing. It's another reason why I love Leica cameras. And this camera, you know, $1,500, if you bought it like in 1950s, you made a lot of money by, you know, by now. And I think this is one of the things about Leica cameras too. One of the reasons why sometimes investing on certain models of Leica cameras, you know, it's some sort of like parking your money per se, because they do depreciate, but also inflation makes them appreciate if you keep them in good condition. And this camera, I don't know what was the equivalent back in the 50s, but definitely wasn't $1,500. So it's a great camera right here. No meter, no battery to deal with. It takes 35mm film, 2 parameters to adjust, 2 things to focus on, and a lot to learn from natural light or, you know, the environment. So this is gonna be my video. Drop your comments down below if you're experienced with the Leica M3. Let me know what else I can actually try with this camera. I know that there is a light meter, and of course I won't be getting a light meter. I think it just defeats the purpose for what I want this camera. And I'm gonna be posting some of the black and white images. And remember guys, I make camera straps under Al Crown, so you can go and check it out on Instagram. And I'm thinking about what type of camera strap I'm going to design for this particular camera. Give me some ideas in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.